Okay. Welcome to Flipping the Narrative. I'm Alicia, and I'm very excited about today's topic of navigating climate conversations during the holiday season. It's my pleasure to welcome conversation expert Jane O'Shea. Welcome, Jane.
Hi.
So let's get right into it because we've only got 30 minutes. Would you like to introduce yourself?
I teach people how to have difficult conversations for a living. I've been doing it for about 10 years now. And what I realized about 6 years ago was that climate change conversations are the most difficult of them all. So I did a lot of practicing and made a lot of boo-boos and worked out some things that work. So that's what I want to share with you today.
Excellent.
Okay. So to start?
Yes, let's get stuck in.
Okay. So I am going to go through a whole lot of things that you can do. However, if these things don't work and the conversation gets edgy, the most important thing to do is to gracefully step out of the conversation. And the way I would suggest you do that is to say to people, my relationship with you is more important than us agreeing on climate change. Let's have a cup of tea, let's have a beer, let's go for a walk, let's do something, that's ultimately the most important thing. So that's what I want you to keep in the back of your mind. Meanwhile, I'm going to go through a lot of things that might get you to not having the edgy conversation, that will have a more constructive conversation. Okay, so here we go. So the most important thing to realize is that you can never change anybody's mind by making them wrong. We do not like to be criticized as humans, not just them, us too. So in the history of trying to change somebody's mind by making them wrong, probably might have worked once. It doesn't work. And we keep on trying to do it. Ask my husband, I still try and do it on occasions. So it's really hard when you're talking to somebody and you know they're wrong. Because you understand about the climate, you understand about the environmental breakdown, you know what they're saying is not true. So how do you have that conversation without making them wrong? Okay, here we go. So the first thing to understand is that this is a highly emotional topic. Yeah, we try to throw facts around because it's science and think that it's not emotional, but it's highly emotional. And it gets a lot of people into a threat response. So what I want you to do is to realize that if the conversation gets a bit touchy, the chances are that them or both of you are in a threat response. So basically we've got three parts to our brain. We've got the back part of our brain, which is the reptilian brain, which is the part of our brain that's the oldest one, and its job is to keep us safe and alive. Yeah. And it gets first dibs on everything. We don't go, oh, I wonder if that sound is the tiger or the wind. We act as if it's a tiger, and then our front part of the brain goes, oh, it's the wind. Yeah. So then we've got the mammalian brain, and I'm not going to talk about that one. Then we've got the prefrontal cortex, and we're the only species that has that. And that's the part of the brain that can reflect on the past, analyze, and plan. So basically, that's the only part of the brain where you can change your mind. So that's all very interesting. But what brain scans have shown is that you cannot be in both parts of the brain at the same time. Ta-da! So if somebody is in a threat response and you try and deal to this part of the brain, guess what? You're going to completely miss them, And you realize that because you're not getting anywhere. And usually, there's some very good things to know whether you've got somebody in a threat response. They're probably fight or flighting. They're probably butting, arguing with you. They're raising their voice, or they're shutting down. Yeah, they're flighting. Not here. Knock yourself out. Try and get to me. I'm not here. Yeah. So if either of those things happen, then what you have to do is you have to start talking to the back part of the brain, which is so that's an interesting part. So the next part of this is that people believe people they trust. Now, it's not going to be surprising that trust is processed in the front part of our brain and mistrust is processed in the back part of our brain. So then the question is, how do you build trust? Okay. We have a strong need to be understood. People trust people who understand them, which means when you're having these tricky conversations, you've got to do a lot of asking questions and listening. Yeah. Seek that cliche, seek first to understand and then be understood, is absolutely true. Because unless you're building trust with somebody, they are not going to believe what you're saying. Yep. Good point. So, and making them wrong, guess what that does? So understand, and if you're in a flight, if you're in a fight or flight, especially if you're in a fight. Yeah. So I think it's really like if you're in this space, it is emotional. We know what's going on. It's overwhelmingly emotional. And the chances are that we might be in a threat response as well. So so if you find yourself ranting, lecturing, all that stuff, then take a breath, say, oops, sorry, I'm getting into a bit of a rant, and then ask them a question. And so we all need to vent, but do that with each other. Do that with the people who get it. You know, Parliament on a Friday and rant all you want. Because what you have to decide when you're having these conversations is that do you want to have a vent or do you want to have a constructive conversation? If you want to have a constructive conversation, then you have to know what your motivation is, and you have to use discipline, and you have to do all the things that I'm talking about. So that's a decision that you need to make, and to know that the family members and people who are not quite in the tent yet are not the people to have your vent with. Okay, so so that's the first part of sort of the background of it. The other part about it is that if you could invent something that is going to bypass all our evolutionary threat responses and all our natural biases from that we've evolved to have, climate change would win the prize hands down. So we don't naturally have a threat response to it. Our brain doesn't register it as a threat. So if you understand that, then you can be more understanding of people who haven't got it. And I'll go through right now some of those things as to why it's so difficult. And so in order to be in the tent, you have two things have had to happen. Either you've done a lot of reading and understanding and listening from the front part of your brain, so then the front part of the brain gets it, and then the back part of the brain goes, holy shit! Or somebody you really trust has explained it to you, and then it figures, So the reasons why it doesn't trigger us is that we respond best to things that are clear and visible here and now. Yeah. So I'll just go back to that. Our hardwiring is evolutionary psychology. Our ancestors who behaved a certain way lived long enough to replicate, and that's the hardwiring threat response that we've got now. So what we've always responded to, things are clear and visible here and now. Climate change is none of those. We also have trouble responding to threats that are complex, where there's no clear solution and that the results are irreversible. Climate change is all of those things. Yeah. So it bypasses those natural things. The other thing that we really, really, really respond to is having an enemy, an identified enemy. Yeah. Yeah. Because then our cortisol comes up and our adrenaline comes off, and we're in for the fight. The problem with climate change is we are part of the problem. Yeah? We are the enemy, which makes it really hard for us to get. It's like, whoa. So that's another thing. The other thing is that we really enjoy the story. If you look at myths and legends, it's the hero's journey. That's what we respond really well to, which is there's adversity and the hero goes off and fights the dragons, comes back and is changed and all is well. Yeah. There's none of that in climate change. There's no all is well and there's no heroes. Yeah. So there's another reason why we don't respond to it well. So that's just the threat responses. Now let's get some biases.
Yay.
So when you understand this, you can be more understanding of the people who don't get it. That's why I'm going through that. Yeah. Once you can get that bit, then you don't go into you're less likely to go into a threat response yourself. Like, you stupid, how can you not? I'll just give you another fact. Yeah. Okay. So there's a lot of research on this stuff, and one of the things that's really understood is that we have a bias towards our in-group and out-group, which is our strongest decision-making process is to conform to what we consider to be our in-group. I mean, the Democrats and the Republicans in the United States are a perfect example of this. So if you imagined back when we were evolving, if you were expelled from your in-group, you died. So we have a strong need to conform to our in-group. And so one of the biggest problems that's happened with climate change is that the left picked it up and put all their images and framing onto it. And then they tied it to all their other things that they're really important, like social justice and decolonization and everything else. Now that makes it really hard if you identify with the right, because to walk onto it, oh my God, I might get the client want to be interested in the climate change thing, but what, I've got to get into this and this, and you're all bloody hippy dippies and da 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 da. So to understand, it's really hard. It's as hard for that as it is if you identify with the left to get to agree with something on the right. It's all tied to a whole lot of things that you don't agree with. Yeah. So to understand that, so if you're talking to somebody who identifies with the right, you've got to be really careful about your language. You've got to talk their language, and you've got to make an easy bridge for them to get there. Because if you polarize them, guess what? Okay. Right, so moving right along. Then we have the bystander effect. And the bystander effect is that we step back and we wait to see if other people do anything. Yeah? And if they don't, then we don't do anything. This has been proven over and over and over again.
Yes.
So you've got to be really, so we're all looking. You know, oh, look, those climate change activists are still flying to Europe. I can fly to Europe. Yeah, so that's another thing that sits there. So to be able to step out of the bystander effect, excuse me, and to actually take a stand yourself, people find quite scary. We also have an endowment effect. We would rather have something now than twice as much of that later. Yeah. So it's really hard to say, if you give up your this, and this, you'll have that later. Or if you don't give up this, and this, things will be worse then. Our brain doesn't respond to it. Evolutionarily, grabbing hold of what's in front of you to make sure you're fed right here and now has been the thing. So that makes it really difficult as well. So all of these things sit in the way, and there's more of them as well. I've got a whole list of them. So to be so what I'm saying is, when somebody's not agreeing, somebody doesn't get it, be kind. There's a whole lot of things in there that stop us from getting it. I've done a lot of reading to work out what it is in people that do get it, but there's nothing there's a lot of ideas, but nothing empirical's come up. So don't understand why we get it, but a whole lot of reasons why it's hard to get it. So what I'm saying is, no matter what somebody's saying, is to be empathetic and to be kind and to be generous. Yeah,
makes sense.
Yeah. Okay, so those are all the reasons why it's hard. So what you want is, so how do we do it? So the first thing I've talked about is to realize what your motivations are, and to make sure you want to have a constructive conversation. The second thing is to know that you do not have to get somebody from where they are all the way to where you're at. It's a conveyor belt, yeah? The best you can hope is to get them on the conveyor belt, or even contemplating, or move them along, yeah? Mostly because research has shown that at the end of an exchange that we have with somebody, we don't tend to remember what somebody said or what they did. We remember how we felt at the end of that. So the most important thing is that at the end of the conversation, that it is a positive experience for the other person. Because if it's not, guess what you've done? You've polarized them. If it is, even if it's, oh my goodness, I've talked to somebody on the left who's a climate change activist and they're not nutters, you know, even if that's as much as it is, the next time they see something in the newspaper or somebody's talking about it, they're more likely to step into it and be open to it. So the most important thing is that people have a good experience in this conversation with you. Yeah. And I have had feedback, because I do a lot of work in the rural sector, is, I thought all you greenies were all nutters. Oh, you're quite reasonable, really. And if that's as far as I got, I've done a good job, because I haven't polarized them more. Okay. The other thing is that builds trust is asking permission. So if the conversation starts, I always stop with, when it's become obvious that this is the conversation that's about to happen, I always say, is it okay that we talk about this? Yeah. Most people say yes, but in the process of asking permission, you build trust. Yeah. So always ask permission if you can, because this is a really scary topic for a lot of people. The next thing is that when we're talking, that we do a yes and not an oh but, even if we're saying the same thing. And I'll give you some examples. So somebody says, I don't believe this stuff. I don't think it's true. You can say, yeah, it's really hard to believe. It's really hard for us to believe that we can affect something as huge as the climate. Yeah? And then the and is, the and something like, and everything that I've read and understood says that we have. Holy shit. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
So it's yes and. If you go, oh no, it is. The IPCC report is this and this and this and this and this.
Yeah.
People are more likely to jump into the back part of their brain. So everything is a yes and. Yep. Like somebody says to you, oh, do you drive a petrol car? You must have got that one.
Yes. Once or twice.
Yes, I do. I admit there's things I do that I'm hypocritical about. It's really hard to live in the Western world and not be. These are the things that I've changed, and this is what I'm in the middle of changing, and this is what I'm going to. Yeah. So it's yes and. So I said so that's the next thing. I'd said before about seek first to understand and then be understood. A way of a kind of a rule of thumb is that you listen 60% of the time and you talk 40% of the time. If you're doing that, the chances are the other person's going to feel heard. Yep. So that's just if I'm manipulating the conversation, chances are I'm not understanding the other person. And what do? You ask a good question, you know? And a good question, not a pretend question, is don't you think that this is true? It's a question of what do you reckon about that? Yeah. What do you think should happen next? Why do you think that hasn't happened so far? Those are inquiry questions, not statements dressed up to be questions. Okay. The other thing that I have found really useful is I've always found that right-wing older men to be the most difficult, you know, Uncle Jim. And what I have worked out works really well is I say to them, you know what, I find it really curious that two of the most conservative industries in the world, whose job is to assess future risk, are all over this. And they go, what do you mean? And I go, well, the military and the insurance industry. And they go, oh. And I go, yeah. I mean, a report came out just a few months ago from the US military that climate change is the biggest threat to national security. You know, you can go look it up. It's right there, and it's not like they're lefties. They also think one of the security risks is that that the Russians are going to get the Arctic oil. So it's not like they're greenies. They're just putting it clearly that climate change is the biggest national risk. And then I said the insurance industry. Go onto any insurance website. They would be telling you where, even in New Zealand, they're very clear about where they're going to be moving back from because of sea level rise, all that kind of stuff. And so then I just go to them. I don't argue with them. I go and have a look. It's really curious. End of conversation. Let's have a beer. Works a treat. Because I'm talking their language. Yes. I'm talking about something they believe in. Yes. All of them will believe in the military, and all of them will be insuring all of their stuff up to the hilt. Okay. So I don't tend to do the fact thing. if I find, like in the beginning when I'm asking questions and I notice that somebody likes facts, like then talk in that level. If not, just send them off to Drawdown is the best because it's so well researched. Carbon Tracker, 350.org, Sunrise Movement, they are all websites that are fairly neutral. They don't have that thing that the left does where they pile everything up together and like to use their imagery and their language. Okay. So that's the introduction. We've done what to do. Now I want to go through common objections. Yep. Yes. So I'm going to go through them and I'm going to answer them all with a yes and not an oh but. So one of them is, this is a natural process, right? You go, yes, it is. Unfortunately, it usually takes tens of hundreds of thousands of years and we're doing it in a couple of hundred. That's the problem. Yeah. Mm-hmm. The science isn't settled yet. You go, well, let's say it isn't. I think it is, but let's say it isn't. Imagine, I also give analogies, so this is the analogy I give. Imagine you're about to get on an aeroplane and 7 of the engineers say it's safe, it's not safe, and 3 of them say that it is safe. Would you get on that aeroplane? Probably not. Even if it was 50-50, would you get on the aeroplane? Probably not. Well, at the moment, we're hitting at about 97% of scientists saying that it's true. So just think about when you get on the airplane. So I just give it an analogy that people can step into. Next one. But it was cold this winter. And I said, of course. I said, climate change is the result of the problem, which is global warming. So everything's warming up, but the climate is changing. Everything's going to be more intense. The cold's going to be colder, and the hot's going to be hotter, and the wind's going to be windier, and the storms are going to be stormier. And so you're going to, yes, it is going to get colder. We're going to get extremes. That's the problem. Yep. Global warming causes the climate to change. How do we know that any particular drought or storm is due to climate change? I give an analogy. I go, well, let's look at this. So you hear that an athlete has started taking steroids, and their performance has gone up 40%. Now, you can't say that they won that race because of the steroids, but you can say that the 40% increase is because of the steroids. Same with climate change. So using things that people can understand easily.
Yeah, that's great.
The next one, technology will save us. And I go, yeah, but you know what? I'm not going to keep on talking because cancer, lung cancer might be cured before I die. And the other thing is that, let's look at our cell phones. Technology's got to the point where it just seems magical. And then we think that anything can happen. But you know what? If I drop this, no amount of technology is going to stop it from falling down. Yep. Because the technology has to be within the laws of science, of basic physics and chemistry. So, and if technology is going to save us, I wish it would hurry up because things are getting a little bit tight. So that's my answer to that.
Yes.
Right, moving right along. The IPCC in the United Nations. Yeah, I got that one. And I go, well, if you look at the COP25, I'd probably agree with you. However, if we look at the reports, what the reports are 850 scientists from 193 countries, all agreeing. The actual problem with that is because everyone has to agree that it tends to be quite conservative. So, and what they're doing is they are peer reviewing all of the science that's happened in the last 5 years.
Okay.
So the United Nations, yep, I think that they can be they don't do as good a job as they could. However, I think that the IPC reports, because there are so many scientists doing it, and it's so many countries, I trust it. How do we know the increase in CO2 is man-made? Yep, another one that you get. So I say that's a really good question, and the answer is quite technical. I can't give you the technical answer, but I can give you a generalized. So when scientists can look at the molecules of CO2 and work out where it comes from. So the CO2 from ice cores has a different makeup than the CO2 that is in the atmosphere at the moment. And they can tell that this is from burning fossil fuels basically. And other times it hasn't been. So I can't tell you the science on that, but go find somebody who can because it's well known. How about the idea that the sun is cooling down? Yep. We're in a mini ice age. I go, we are. The only problem is that it's this much, and what we're doing is this much. It's just not big enough to make a big difference. If we weren't going through a cooling phase, we would be even worse off than we are now. So see how it's a yes and? I'm not doing I'm not going, oh no, you're wrong, I'm right. I'm going, yes, and here's a little bit more of how I see it.
Yeah.
Okay. It's just a hoax.
The most common.
So I go, when people say that, I go, wow, you've got thousands of scientists and journalists agreeing on the same narrative for decades. they must be really smart to be able to hold that one together. They might even be smart enough to be actually know what they're talking about. I go, that's a pretty big hoax to hold for that long, without and conspiracies tend to fall apart as time goes on. This one's getting stronger. And I said, that's what made me come to the realization that I didn't think it was a hoax. And if it is, I will be dancing in the streets. Hallelujah. I don't want this stuff to be happening. And then we get more of people who, but what about China? What about China? And I go, well, I don't think you can penalise people just because it's a bigger country. I think we need to look at per capita. We're about 3 times per capita of China, and that's including outsourcing them making all our stuff. New Zealanders, we don't do very well. We're about 17th of the world. We've gone from 17.5 tonnes to 16.5 tonnes. Unfortunately, our population's gone up, so we're still increasing. So if you look at other, we don't do very well at all, and that does not include aviation. If you put tourism in there, we would be right up the top. We'd be pretty screwed. So I don't really go for this country thing. I think it always has to be per capita. But the problem's overpopulation, and I go, well, I don't know, because what the research shows is it's about wealth. The poorer countries are not, it's most parts in Africa, they're about 1 tonne per person, 17.5. Yep. So it's about the amount of wealthy people. And the correlation is, even if somebody says they are a greenie, says that they get climate change, it doesn't make any difference. It is still it is still about how much disposable income you've got. And that's really hard. I found that one hard to swallow, but I've done a lot of research and it seems to be true. Like Finform, that spiritual ecological community in Scotland, they've got, they're all vegetarians and they've got solar power and all this kind of stuff. But their carbon footprint is higher than the average in Scotland. You know what? Because they fly all the time, and all these people fly there to do all their planetary healing meditations. It's not like you can put a little note on that carpet and say, please don't cut this. Sorry.
Oh, brilliant.
Okay. Then you get things like, but what can we do? And I go, yes, it's hard. It's really, really hard when you live in the Western world. And all I know that I've done for me is I've looked at my own life. I've started with the easiest things, and I'm working my way through, and then to get active. But the government won't do anything. That's another one they can do. And I go, you're right. Look at them. They're just tinkering around the edges. However, politicians want to get re-elected. Public opinion is really important. You have to know what you think. Yeah. I've been going and talking to politicians for I don't know how many years now. They know me quite well. And I tend to have good conversations with them. I mean, they invite me back. But what I do won't make any difference. And I go, you're right. If you don't do anything, if all of us think that, nothing will happen. But, a bucket of water is a whole lot of drops. So, just be a drop. Just get on with it and do it anyway. Even if the bystander effect nobody else is, just do it. The other one is, it's all too depressing. And I go, yep, it is. It's probably one of the most depressing things I've ever come across. However, you're saying that you're not going to be able to feel it where our kids and our grandchildren have to live it. The least we can do is feel it, really, when we're asking them to live with it. This is a socialist ploy. That's another one. And I go, oh, no, unfortunately, the answers seem to be about collaboration and agreement between large groups of people, which tends to be a socialist kind of thing. So, yep. That's all I say to that one. Oh, but what about the cost? And I go, yep, well, if you go and have a look on the websites of financial institutions now, they are saying the cost of not decarbonising is going to be way more. There's a lot more information out there about that one.
I hate to interrupt you because this is really, really good. We've got like 25 seconds left.
I that's right. We can finish now.
Yeah, so, this has been amazing. So basically go in with good intent, kindness, empathy, and a strategy for withdrawing from the conversation if it's going to harm your relationship.
And say it in those words.
Yeah.
This relationship is more important